I've been sad that so many of my fellow citizens have been allowed themselves to be so panicked by this virus they don't mind what's being done to them by politicians claiming they'll save them. In Melbourne, there's even a curfew, and Parliament was cancelled as a health hazard. The Legislative Assembly shut. I mean, why shut Parliament if face masks that we're forced to wear are so beaut at protecting us? But then there's the Morrison government. If you saw your federal parliament today, you'd have seen a lot of politicians missing there too. Some are only on video and others rostered off completely, not representing you in your parliament. Joining me is one of the politicians caught up in all this, Nationals MP Barnaby Joyce, former Deputy Prime Minister. Barnaby, thank you for joining me. What has happened to our democracy?
Well, I just think that we have to really make sure that a virus, a pandemic, doesn't take out of Parliament. We have to work with reality, and if that means we have to work remote, that means if that's what they want, then I think everybody's competent enough to press Y for yes on a keyboard and N for no, and then to go to the right-hand side and find the enter button with the little arrow pointing to the left and press enter. I mean, if that's what's required, that's what we should do. But you can't have whole electorates disenfranchised because they're on a roster day off in the Parliament and can't get there. You can't have a Parliament that doesn't have the capability or the possibility of passing a suspension motion to bring about on a new item of business because there's just not 76 people in the Parliament. I mean, this is not how Parliament should work, and we have to lead by example and show a fully operational Parliament to the Australian people.
Well, even as you've suggested on your blog, on your Facebook page, where the visitors gallery, where spectators normally are, open that up. You can do social distancing, stick the politicians up there and have more actually attend. Great idea, mate, great idea. But I'm
there's
just
about 380 extra seats up there. I think there's about an extra 380 seats there. And so we would... You wouldn't be able to throw a piece of paper at the person next to you if you wanted to spread out all the way along there. And this means that if you want to vote, you can go into the chamber and vote.
I don't get it. I don't get it. And Barnaby, what gets me is the overreaction in some areas, like who's going to die by having Parliament sit as you've just suggested? Who really? Meanwhile, we see governments, multiple, not doing the basics to protect people. Look at the aged care thing. Do you think the Morrison government really did enough to protect people in aged care?
Well, the thing is, I can't work this out, how apparently, look, Richard Colbeck's a minister, not a god. He wasn't the person who was actually, I think it's a really argumentum ad hominem to go against a person and say you were therefore responsible for hundreds of deaths. I think that is an outrageous thing to suggest, to think that a person willfully was a part of a process that brought about the deaths of others. And this is we'll have to call it for what it is. It's a complete overreaction. It's just like saying he's responsible for everybody who's happy in an aged care facility, which is also ultimately ridiculous. I mean, this issue, people are managing it as best they can, and I don't see Richard Colbeck as some sort of... They're trying to paint him as some sort of infamous character, and that is completely outrageous. And it also says, it seems to infer that one person's death is, acceptable and hundreds are not acceptable. No, we don't want anybody to die. Every person's life is precious to that family that lost them. And I don't think you can go down and say, well, we're going to use the tragedy of your family for a political attack on a person who, let's be completely frank, had absolutely nothing to do with the tragedy that your family is involved with.
Well, that's it. He's the Minister for Aged Care, and they've got responsibility for, managing this sort of stuff. And I would have thought that the kind of measures that they put in, what it was about a month and a half ago, 2 months ago, they could have put in earlier because these were going to be the killing fields. I've said so since March on this show. I don't know. I wouldn't give them quite that easy a pass. Queensland-style border closures, though, do you support them?
No, look, and you've seen what I've written on this too. Look, I think that this has been used as parochialism to attain a vote. And what we have here is a whole heap of sort of popularity compasses pointing in the direction they think they need to go and bring about complete chaos. If we see what's happening to the economy is going to be a basket case if it goes on like this. We just can't keep borrowing money off the Chinese and from people in the Middle East from people, in Europe to prop up an economy. Ultimately, JobKeeper, JobSeeker, because it's borrowed money, it will come to an end. And if you don't have a resilient economy that's able to stand on its 2 feet, it's going to fall off a cliff. And I'll tell you what the Labor Party will do, because I know their formats. They'll wait to an election, and of course by then we'll have record debt, we'll have the biggest deficit in the history of our nation, the biggest debt in the history of our nation, and we'll have high unemployment. And they'll turn around and say, well, Coalition did that, despite the fact that they wanted us to borrow even more money. But, they'll move on from that, and they'll find the reason, because they know that that's the ace in our pack is economic management. And they know their history, and they know what happened to Scullin, and they know what happened during the Depression. They know what happened to Keating after the recession. They know what happened to Rudd after the GFC. And so I think I would say that it is important to us to have the economy working, but I would also say to the state premiers, after this, the vaccine comes out, and it will come out, and the pandemic is dealt with, you're going to be left with the bits and pieces of your economy that you have to explain to your people as to how it arrived at that spot. Now, if you want to take out some insurance, get your economy working.
Except, Barnaby, I think it's going to be worse than you say. Labor will be saying, oh, you're going to do this and that to fix this enormous budget deficit we'll be left with. They'll actually stop the budget repair. So I think what we're seeing now, mate, your grandchildren will be looking at repaying some of this. Barnaby Joyce, thank you so much indeed for your time.
You're an absolute pleasure, Andrew.